My name is Emily, I'm 32 years old, and at my own father's 60th birthday party, he publicly announced to a room full of his friends and colleagues that I was his greatest disappointment. Before I tell you how I used his own company to deliver a toast he would never forget, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The party was exactly what you'd expect. Held in some stuffy hotel ballroom downtown, the kind with chandeliers that cost more than my car and carpets with patterns so loud they screamed old money. I stood in the back, nursing a glass of sparkling water, trying to be invisible. But then my father, Robert, stepped up to the microphone. He started his speech, thanking everyone for coming. He beamed as he thanked his wonderful, supportive wife, Karen, who preened from the front table. He then put a hand on my stepbrother's shoulder. And I have to thank my son, my successor, Ethan. He's making me proud every single day. The room applauded politely. He was about to wrap up, but then he paused. He scanned the crowd, and his eyes landed on me for a fraction of a second. And, of course, he added, his voice suddenly flat, Emily is here too. She came all the way from Portland for this. That was it. No, my daughter. No words of pride. Just an afterthought. A piece of social trivia. The silence that followed felt heavier than any insult he could have shouted. It was a public dismissal. He hadn't just forgotten me, in front of everyone who mattered to him, he had erased me. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been worn down and exhausted for years, finally snapped. That little speech didn't just give me permission to do what I had been planning. It gave me a mandate. To understand why that one little sentence hit so hard, you have to understand that this wasn't new. This was just the final brick in a wall that he'd been building between us for 20 years. The worst was when I was 18. I had a college fund, saved up by my mom before she passed. It was my one ticket to a good school, my one shot at a life different from the one she'd had. One day, I logged into my bank account to check the balance. My heart stopped. The balance read, $73.24. $20,000. Gone. When I confronted him, shaking with a mix of fear and rage, he couldn't even look me in the eye. It was for the kitchen remodel, he'd mumbled, gesturing vaguely towards Karen's new granite countertops. It's just a loan, Em. We're family. I'll pay it back. He never did. I ended up at a state school, working 2 jobs, drowning in student loans. While Ethan went to an Ivy League college on Robert's dime. That was the moment I knew. I was on my own. So I built my life, brick by painful brick, far away in Portland. I started a small tech investment firm, Vantage Holdings, from my tiny apartment. I worked 80-hour weeks, fueled by coffee and a desperate need to prove him wrong. To prove to myself that I wasn't the disappointment he saw. Which brings me back to the party. As Robert's words hung in the air, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister. The one person who always had my back. I opened it. It read, remember why you're there. You needed to confirm it with your own eyes. Don't act unless you're sure. Did you find out more about that sterling deal? Aunt Linda was the one who had first tipped me off. A few months ago, my firm, Vantage, had made a strategic investment in a mid-sized manufacturing company, Sterling Manufacturing. It was a good deal, solid numbers. I didn't think much of it until Linda called me. You'll never guess who Sterling's biggest client is, she'd said. Your father's company. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. I had come to this party not out of family obligation, but for reconnaissance. I needed to see for myself if anything at all, had changed. So, with that text buzzing in my pocket, I decided to do something I never did before. I stopped avoiding them. I walked right up to my father. He barely looked at me. Thanks for coming, he mumbled, his eyes already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. There was no warmth, no recognition. Just a box, checked. Confirmation number 1. Next, Karen slithered over, a champagne flute in her hand. "Oh, Emily, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Trying to mingle? It must be so hard when you don't have, well, much in common with Robert's world." She looked me up and down, a tiny, smug smile playing on her lips. Confirmation number 2. Then came Ethan. He just gave me that look. You know the one. The one that's half pity, half "I'm so glad I'm not you." He talked about his new promotion, the bonus he was getting. He didn't even ask what I did. He just assumed my life in Portland was some quaint little hobby. Final confirmation. Every fake smile, every veiled insult, it was just another nail in the coffin of the daughter I used to be. The plan was a go. I stepped out onto the balcony for a breath of fresh air, the city lights twinkling below. I needed a moment to center myself before I did it. As I was standing there, a man I vaguely recognized as one of Robert's business partners approached me, bringing a distinguished-looking older man with him. "Emily, I'd like you to meet Michael Davies, our CEO," the partner said. Mr. Davies shook my hand, his grip firm. "Emily Vance," he said, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "Of Vantage Holdings. A pleasure to finally meet you. I've been following your moves. Your acquisition of the Miller patent portfolio last year was brilliant." I felt my blood run cold. He had no idea who I was in that room. He didn't know I was the daughter of the man who worked for him. He just saw me as a peer. A shark. He continued, "The folks at Sterling Manufacturing are certainly lucky to have you on their board now. You've turned that company around." And that was it. That was the last piece. It wasn't just a rumor from Aunt Linda anymore. It was a fact, coming from the mouth of my father's boss. I had the power. And after 20 years of being powerless, I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I walked back inside. I walked past my father, past Karen and Ethan. I walked straight to the small stage, and I picked up the microphone. A low feedback hum echoed through the room, and all eyes turned to me. "I'd like to say a few words, if I may," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was calm, clear. I looked at my father. My father, in his speech, talked about his legacy. And he was right to do so. He taught me the most valuable lesson I ever learned. He taught me that in business, and in life, every single choice has a consequence. I let that sink in. I could see Karen whispering to Robert, a confused, annoyed look on her face. My choice, years ago, was to leave home and build something of my own. My choice was to found an investment firm called Vantage Holdings. A recent choice led my firm to take a majority stake and a board seat at a company called Sterling Manufacturing. I paused and swept my gaze across the front table. I saw the exact moment the name registered on my father's face. The slight widening of his eyes. "And my choice today," I continued, my voice dropping a little, becoming harder, after confirming that some things never change, "is to lead the board vote first thing on Monday morning against renewing the primary supply contract with my father's company. A contract which, as I'm sure you know, Dad, is the only thing keeping your division profitable." The silence in that room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass. Karen's painted-on smile looked like it had cracked. Ethan looked like he'd been slapped. And my father, all the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "So, I'd like to make a toast," I said, raising my water glass. "To choices. And to their consequences." I took a sip, placed the microphone back on its stand, and turned to walk away. The entire room was frozen. As I reached the grand double doors of the ballroom, a hand grabbed my arm. It was Robert. His face was a mask of fury and panic. "You're lying," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You're trying to ruin me. You're doing this because you've always been jealous of Ethan. I looked at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. The fear, the desperation. I felt nothing. No pain. No anger. Just a quiet emptiness. I looked him dead in the eye. This isn't personal, I said, and my voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. It's just business. A lesson I learned from you. I pulled my arm free, turned my back on him, and walked out the door. The sound of it clicking shut behind me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The first thing I did when I got to my car wasn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled out my phone, the sleek little device that I had paid for with my own hard work. I opened my contacts. I found his name. Robert. I tapped it, and I pressed block this caller. Then I found Karen. Block. Then Ethan. Block. It was done. The connection was finally, permanently severed. Fast forward 3 months. I'm in my office. My real office, not the corner of my apartment. It's on the 30th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city of Portland. The city that became my home when my old one threw me away. It's quiet here. Peaceful. The constant, buzzing anxiety that lived under my skin for 2 decades is just gone. Last week, I had coffee with Aunt Linda. She told me she'd heard whispers. That Robert's company was struggling, that he was being forced into early retirement. That Karen was telling everyone I was a vindictive monster. I just took a sip of my latte. Good, was all I said. And I meant it. I used to think the goal was to get a seat at their table. To finally earn their approval. I spent years waiting for an invitation that was never going to come. Now, I understand. The goal was never to get a seat at their table. The goal was to build my own damn table. And then decide who gets to sit there. And as I stand here now, looking at my reflection in the glass, with the city skyline that I helped build behind me, I realize I'm finally home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious, have you ever had to make a really difficult choice to stand up for yourself, either in your family or at work? Let me know your story in the comments below, I promise I'll read them. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. It really helps the channel out. Thanks for watching.